think they want to protect it so bad? It is not just to do with, okay, let's just take over the land. You all need to pay attention to certain areas underneath and certain areas like this. Biochemical agents and warfare scenes and the tunnelizing effects that they are using breeding zones. They are reptilian races. The Draconian races are able to inbreed and bring in a good population because these biochemical agents uplift them. They're in turn frequency outlets. Think about cockroaches. Think about other types of insects, other types of reptiles who can handle biochemicals. They're similar. It can cause sicknesses to mankind because nuclear waste obviously can, and the planet.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 30. Blue, how are you?
I'm good today, Mike.
Hey, what are we going to talk about today in episode 30?
Well, the Wendigos in Helltown, Ohio. One of the main nativity scenes of what happened around 1775, between the years acclimated to that point up until now, between government statistics, a known creature that is a cannibalistic, of a formature recently, the reasons why that creature came into designation and why Native Americans had to do with something in the back lay of the town, and as well as what they had hid and portrayal on underground scenes with government opsis effects into finding out and designating what these creatures can do, and how nuclear waste had an habitual node in other types of material to define and pretty much reconstruct certain elements with certain types of creatures signalized like this and others on paranormal accounts.
Crazy. It's a crazy world we live in. I can't wait to dive deeper into that right there. We've talked about Ohio in the past, so this is going to be interesting. Hey, before we get started here, though, I want to thank everybody for watching, thank everybody for listening, and please make sure you click like, subscribe, and click on a notification so you know when we set out new stuff. Blue, tell me more about this Helltown.
Well, now part of Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Helltown, Ohio used to be habitable by an actual town of people. The government, they drove them out for reasons unknown. Now, a person, I believe President Gerald Ford, protected large lands and habitual areas and turned them into parks. This was one of them. Why they had done and dealt with this, it had to go and delve in deeper. And was situated right on a war trail too, as well. When you go back in time before the government had actually polarized people outwards, they had dealt with the Native American Indians. And in the certain tribes that had dealt with that, these had used the trail as a war zone pretty much, or initializing zone between themselves and the British, because the British at the time, they had pretty much induced or deducted them out of their own homeland. And they had pushed them into a certain area like this. These Native Americans used to call this place Clearwater, clear. But when they had found out, there was certain allocated frequencies that people had thought to, where there's a German name, it turned into hell. So supposedly it stabilized turning into Helltown, and it used to be Clearwater because of the rivers or the forests that flowed up along there at the time. They had pretty much rehabilitated these Native Americans themselves to that land because these people at the time drove them out. It had caused problems, and they wanted to announce a certain treaty. These Native Americans were called the Lenape people. The Lenape people, 1775. It was around that time that this correlated in that area. Now, when they had made this certain treaty, and designated it. The problem was they again went after them, even that they had set this treaty. It's called the Eastern Approval to stop it, to stop the negative aspects between two. Because they didn't listen, they collided again. They caused bad infrastructure between each other, and eventually, even the Native Americans had to move out of that town. It ended up becoming too much of a war zone, which circulated into the Wendigo itself, and most recent, because the Wendigo had a lot to do with the folklore that had, there have been similar aspects to the folklore with the Native Americans and the so-called Wendigo creature.
There's a satanic church there too, isn't there?
Yes. Now, I'm not saying that the Native Americans are satanic, but when you drive something out of another fortifying speed and they've done nothing but good on their own inlet, there are paranormal aspects or higher aspects that will push back on the agenda. Maybe bringing renown peace and forgiveness to what you have caused and relapse. And there is a similar aspect to that. Because they could have announced and brought up a negative being because they class with each other. Negative beings per se do not always simulate from an enactment zone of a good standard or a bad standard. Sometimes because of karma itself, and karma is a real thing, or something similar to that, something else can be brought out. Because there was so much negativity brought there and no type of cleanse whatsoever. Now, if you think about it nowadays with a certain Biden administration, and recently with there are certain beings correlating and drowning themselves into the lands, causing similar problems, wanting to take over, wanting to cause destruction and mayhem and violence. Doesn't this sound familiar? I mean, the aspect of it is there are two circulations going on. There are timeline intervals that can circulate, whether it's in towns, cities, manualization codes at a higher pretense, matrix planetary formats. And I want to go a little bit deeper about the government part of this, but the church part, because they worshiped this being, they felt that they would relieve the negativity that this Wendigo was causing, taking bones out of people's and other animals and stuff and leaving the carcass. It was a bad relapse because after what they had caused so much dedication to run against certain nativity tribes, it caused an inlast upon the timeline. It brought in a portal to a negative being. We don't need that. And the churches themselves, because of the portals, because of that, they worshiped that being because they felt that it would help ease the flow of things, but really it didn't. I mean, in a way it did, in a way because they brought in types of animals and other things to give it to, so we could take the bones out and this and that. But even the government's underground had tried to captivate it in that area. There's around the cemeteries, and there's a certain cemetery there that there was an underground fortification zone. They had actually established someone come down there. It was on movie scenes and stuff. They showed the clips of everything, that there was blocked off by cement or something right underground. And they found it, they drilled the hole into the cement, and it ended up with a desolate underground facility. And they found out that it had to do with this creature, the Wendigo, and what the government had actually did with it.
Wow. That's crazy. I was doing some additional work here behind the scenes, and something peculiar I came up with here was East Palestine, Ohio, where they recently had that train derailment. That's an hour away. That's basically within the confines, or just near the confines of this restricted area, this national area that Ford pronounced. My question is do you think there's ever a time where this Helltown, or I know they used to call it Boston, Helltown, will be resurrected into something new? Can they knock everything down, pave over it, throw some blessings down, and do something different? Or is this just how this place is going to be? Stay away.
Well, until certain creature is confined and they find out what they can do with it, because it is a cemetery node of a demon itself that had been cast into this programming speed because of what they had done on running phase. They had trying to figure out captivation and maybe allocating a frequency tone, like you said, to a more cleansing statistic. Otherwise, it's going to still pose a threat. There are several other parks, recreations, and even caves like the Mammoth Cave that are protected in areas. They are protected kind of similar to what this is, to protect mankind from being harmed because of the things that have happened before.
Wow. Crazy. I'm convinced there's spots like this all over that we may not know about, or most of the mass population may not know about. One of those places is in Chernobyl. I know we want to talk about that today as well, right?
Absolutely. Chernobyl and the scenes of effect of bionuclearized agents and elementals being established there in certain base areas. Now, Chernobyl, dealing with the Alpha Centaurans in Ukraine, intense. I mean, think about it. Ukraine has the Chernobyl, they're very quite close, or are not, they've inoculated into each other. Underground labs, areas surrounding there, and as well as correlating and funding through agents of higher terrestrial modes, meaning besides the bio weapons or bio agents they're dealing in, as well as breeding zones, they're also dealing with getting help and assistance to certain type of Orion Greys. These Orion Greys have similar star unit ships in representation to Zeta Reticuli and other types of Greys, but they're different. And there are Archon relay codes that simulate to that are more of a metallic alloy and substructure that is oval inoculated base status reroutes to certain iode wavelengths. So it is designated not on a good code because they run through these Alpha Centauri Draconians. There are certain places that they can use this type of weaponized agent or elemented agent to reconstruct on their own wavelength or propose to maintain their own distribution points. Now, I'm not saying nuclear is at all bad. There is a nuclear property that can be good and maintained for mankind when it deals with quantum. There are other beings that deal with port evasion nodes, biopsis, government, military, and themselves, but not to dealing with Chernobyl. And if there was a Chernobyl, it would not be in the same circulated area. There have been other types of species that have come and gone through there too because of the high radioactivity and the zones per se. But there are at least 3 to 4 different areas in those zones that are replicated on a bad wave. There are people that are dealing with paranormal accounts there when they have visited there in these certain zones, and there are people that have been attacked. There are people that have just seen things and have experienced things on a higher account that were not good. These areas are protected. They are actually used still.
You know, the thing that drives me crazy is I'm of Ukrainian descent, okay? And I often wonder about, you know, and I've done the ancestry thing. I've tried to find, you know, someone tangible or someone that I can connect to, and I've been unsuccessful in that mark so far. But my question is this an area that can be reclaimed eventually? I know we talked about Helltown, and you know, it probably won't be. Is this similar to Helltown in that this is it? This is it forever. It's done.
No. It's not like Helltown. It's a place that needs to be. Helltown can be recaptivated. It can be maintained. It's not bionuclear. There are certain areas in there that they have used nuclear agents underground in Helltown, but it's nothing like Chernobyl where it went outwards. Chernobyl itself is a maintainment bad zone, negative zone that needs to be decommissioned. There are certain technologies that can get rid of these negative actuation lines that are being all over the bioelemental scenes. Well, number 1, there are underground labs that need to be taken out of commission there. Number 2, Draconians run underlawn and underground events in these areas. And think about the Biden administration himself. These negative beings are using underground fortifying speeds that close sector to and tunnel through certain areas in Ukraine. Why do you think they want to protect it so bad? It is not just to do with, okay, let's just take over the land. You all need to pay attention to certain areas underneath and certain areas like this. biochemical agents and warfare scenes and the tunnelizing effects that they are using breeding zones. They are reptilian races. The Draconian races are able to inbreed and bring in a good population because these biochemical agents uplift them. They in turn frequency uplift. Think about cockroaches. Think about other types of insects, other types of reptiles who can handle biochemicals. They're similar. It can cause sicknesses to mankind because nuclear waste obviously can, and the planet. But when they're using that agent to sequence themselves and the data streams that, could be in the AR artificial encryptancy codes too, the certain COVID they may be using. You need to pay attention because there are good grays, there are bad types of grays. And I'm talking about these. On my hand, okay, we're talking that the Orions are negative, the Matrix are negative. They use equipment and specialized artificial and advanced intelligent biopsis waves to help remove certain fortifying zones and certain replicated zones and areas. We're all living in the Matrix. You have to understand you're surrounded by water and you have an inner world and a Gartha scene. And you also have negative data streams from other types of beings that had outletted this for a while.
It's interesting to me that if you do your own research here, and I've been talking about this on some other podcasts for a little while now, but I mentioned I'm of Ukrainian descent, and it really bothered me because almost immediately I was able to identify that there were some of these biolabs and things that we were funding as a country. We have a vested interest in these things. We've been paying for it with our tax dollars and not knowing it. And it's just like you said, I think Putin may have thought that he needed to eliminate these threats to him. They're right across the border. Now, I'm not saying one guy's right and one guy's wrong because I don't like the fact that they're fighting anyway, but at the same time, I can't blame a guy for wanting to, it's like if you live in Florida and in Georgia, they got these biolabs and it's not far at all. So, but I get it. And I also know that in Ukraine, there's a certain battalion of Nazism. There's a portion of their military force that is Nazis. They're called the Azov Battalion. And it really makes me wonder, do you think somebody like the Azov Battalion could be related to these Draco reptids?
Well, they could be time traveler drifters. There are many other things that Chernobyl I'd like to explain about too, but those sounds like time drifters. Time drifters can, especially with the ex-German president, I believe, Hitler, wasn't it Hitler? Adolf Hitler. He was a time traveler. He was a time initializer, but he also had an ET infusal causeway of him. The effect of a higher being in his status coach. They could be similar and they can work with programmable speeds throughout the timelines like that. Him and other types of beings.
Now, are we also saying that some of these tunnels are used in trafficking as well?
Yes, but not in this area. This area is more or less breeding zones and inlay signature coding ways. Now, it could correlate up and around another area because it has certain iota effects through the breeding zones. But if it is, it's not into that because it has too much a high toxicity effect. It would affect the human children. They don't want that. They would go around that. This is a more inlet effect of something else in a biochemical scene, as well as agents into that. But Chernobyl had to do with in between paranormal effects, not just negative beings. And we're going to get to that now, about the blackbird of Chernobyl. An acclaimed on-site huge bird, about 20 feet, that has been sighted up and around the tube stacks, the main foundation of the site itself, going in and out. Some people have acclimated that this being was headless or looked like a man type of bird being, and the phenomenon itself, to try to figure and decipher that out. Yes, there could be other creatures of a paranormal account, and those creatures can have glowing red eyes, and they couldn't be in the in-between. They could come from Agartha itself. This being may live here or come here, just like dragons and others do, because of the higher io effects or the elementals in that area. It attracted this being and now it lives there.
Wow. It's crazy because not too far from the area in Ohio, in West Virginia, they have the folklore of the Mothman. And that's the first thing I thought of when you said that. Do you think they're related just in two different areas or no?
Because of the area, yeah, the Mothman might find its habitat of a better cleared standing zone, and as well as through that correlated zone that dealt with Chernobyl. The Wolfman, remember we explained about that before. There's two different types, one more in the western, one more in the northeastern. Just like humans have different habitats they're more accustomed to, like the African, the this, the that, the white, they're still, because of their skin itself, they're more fortified to certain zones, or they get accustomed to it, even if they're this different type of color skin, whatever. It goes through other creatures as well. They're animals, even the paranormals. Where they can get accustomed to, where they're most comfortable at is where they will be at. The vibrators on a Duga 1 array. They're now supposedly a abandoned site. And it's a receiver, a horizon radar receiver, about 150 meters tall and 75 meters long. And attracted a lot of people's attention because of the extraterrestrial look about it. These radon vibrator screens, they're still active. But they symbolize between what I had just said with these certain elementals and that. It's an on-site communication platform, a higher terrestrial mode. So that is still active, but they're going to notice that because the certain type of particles they're enacting outwards are different than regular electricity. So they're able to hide certain programming speeds through it. And as well as Falcon Lake with the cylinder objects. A lot of the Falcon Lake areas of Stephen explained about getting burned when he got too close to one of the crafts. And the burn on his chest cymatically came on and off until he passed away. It was there until he passed away. And the rash from it. And it did a lot of different things to his skin and his stomach. And that was in Ukraine. The hovering objects there. He got too close, and it shows that's similar to that object there, is similar to what certain Orions use.
Wow.
All right.
I find that interesting as well. Let's go ahead and talk about Starseeds.
Absolutely. When we're dealing with Starseeds and innovation effects, Arctech, buildings, upcoming building zones that deal with a planetoid arctectodrome of civilization, living a stabilizer that could do for cities and founding towns. Now, I did post about this recently, and other governmentals are other leaders working towards making this a reality within the next 2.5 to 4 years. Now, underground, upper ground fortification speeds through the underground quantum arc tube subsystems. What Elon Musk, and similar to the trajectory the Federation would want. These subsystems will go from one point to the other within minutes or seconds and designate into an anti-gravity polarity shift that would maintain the hologram itself up into these type of Arctech pods, Arctech drones. Now, on the outside, it's smaller. They're pretty big. And then they have a stem pretty much that symbolizes holding them. There is also a broadband, higher electromagnetic anti-grav field that surrounds the actual perimeter itself of the drone, so it helps keep it stable unless something happens with the actual stem that holds it. It holds 2 leeway conjunctions for safety. Once you're in it, you actually shrink. So once you get into the main middle format of these drones, it shrinks the hologram or any other type of substructure. So it's a lot bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And because of that, it alleviates a lot of the negative broadband signature coatings that are going on the outside, on the ground. That way there could be more stability for the plants and the animals itself.
Is this at all related to BRICS? I know we talked about that in the recent past, and there's some.
That's a quantum financial system. Yes, it does, but we're talking about the Starseeds and actually programming into the cities. We're moving into a next generation that's going to play like a movie itself, but actually come into reality. So that way the generalization codes, like us higher beings that are in human format, are moving into the formalization modes of humans itself, humanoid biopsis gridding effects.
During this
quantum age.
During this transition here, is there anything that we need to be on the lookout for, on the watch out for? Is there any danger?
No, this is actually moving and motorizing the actual quantum age into effect. The Starseeds, the ascension process, this is something all the leaders and elites through. There are certain ones on main elevators. I believe Thailand, that's a hint. Thailand working towards a goal, as well as mass outbreaks of moving these forward. We want to clear out the negative wave spans that these beings are causing, these Draconians. We want to maintain better ethics for this planet. We don't want constant movement speeds of construction nodes being placed everywhere, and then there'll be no plants left, no wildlife left, no this left, no that left. There are easier ways and higher technologies to motivate around it. On the ground, above it, and underneath. That way, the actual planet is actually stabilized with the movement speeds of mankind's next generation.
We think Elon Musk is going to be a big part of this.
Yes, he was dealing with the quantum tube system. Sublet internal risk processing speeds of what the Federation presidents would have wanted. So if you already paid attention, the boring systems, the tube systems, all that stuff, that also will go into this soon. It's not going to be within a day. This is something that's going to take a while, like I stated. But it is moving forward.
Anything to report from the Space Force and the Federation?
Well, Elon Musk and Twitter, moving it to X. But really, the main motivator for this is stabilizing a Starseed platform, QXCOM, Quantum Extracurricular High Advanced Communications, a platform that would motivate, awaken the minds of mankind, and process a better speeding wave for the next generation, and take away the stupidity out of what is already correlating. Number one. One match may be postponed because Elon might have to get surgery. But maybe there's a hint to that. If we could put that into an intellectual war instead of a physical aspect, maybe opening the minds that Mr. Zuckerberg is in the programming speeds of Facebook itself needs to be routed better. We do not need no more negativity. We need more in the protection recalling codes. So if we're going to have a heated wave between both and one and the other doesn't work out, maybe intellectually wise, get your shits together and maintain a Starseed generation to this too, as well as Twitter. Enough is enough.
Absolutely. You're still on Team Elon, right?
Absolutely.
All right, good. So am I.
We are saying that Elon, if he's getting a problem with this, he needs to get an intellectual war into progress with him and Zuckerberg, and went over that with intellect. Because Zuckerberg doesn't have the intellect that Elon possesses when it comes to certain things. And really, when you're going against each other, you use your intellect. That may be a good motivator above the other sector. You want to go physical with it, that's your own choice. But I would play careful, and I would play on a careful stepping stone, because now he is warning out this.
I've talked about Zuckerberg in the past, and I've talked about Elon in the past, and I believe they are both from some other higher dimension, another place, another time, what have you. They definitely have had some influence, if they're not directly, an extraterrestrial or something. They definitely have had that influence there. And speaking of extraterrestrial, let's talk about our ET of the week.
Yes, the Rakes. Bystander mixed man-made species, according to numerous underground labs that manufacture and opted out. And a lot of these labs signalized the state of Florida and USA. There have been ones in California, been other ones up in the other northern and western hemispheres. And the eastern side has numerous labs as well in certain wet underneath areas. Warm temperaments and control helps elevate these creatures. And their biopsis effect, they will attack on sight. They usually go into groups of 2 to 5, but maintain it if there is one, stay away. These beings are real and they do cry out a certain screech. And the screech is humanoid in perception. You hear it, you run away. They come out at night, they're nocturnal. But they were dislodged from the scientists, and they're actually real governments now that come up and search for these, and up to and including Ocala National Forest in Florida, where they are off limits and protected. There are certain areas protected because of these beings. These were gone wrong by mankind, and they were alienoid humanoid mix.
You know, I've heard of some weird things going on in the Ocala Forest area. I live not too far from that, and I've heard of not only weird things happening or weird sightings happening, but the military sometimes does bombing runs in that area. Now they say that's testing or practice or what have you, but you know, it makes me wonder, is there something more to that now that you brought this to my attention, that this was a thing, you know, a thing
Yes.
that's gone wrong? So
I personally lived by Ocala a while back ago, a few years ago. I have personally run into these creatures at night. I have heard their screams. I know how they live and where they live. And I guarantee you those areas are off limits for a reason. And you don't want to screw with that. Now here in the city by West Palm Beach, they don't hang around areas that have too much people. They only hang around areas where they can hide. Now if they are in this area, it would only be through certain tunnel systems around here to travel. They like wet areas where they can hide more.
Wow. And just like that, we're out of time today. Great show again, episode 30. I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank everybody for listening. And just a reminder, please go ahead and like, subscribe, and click on notifications. And if we're not somewhere where you get your stuff, let us know and we'll jump on that platform right away. Blue, it's been wonderful. I look forward to 30 more episodes at least. Thank you. Good stuff.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. We'll see you next time, folks.